Good morning. My name is Tomasz Poprawka, and I'm here at the Foundation for Polish Science headquarter offices, and I will have a pleasure and privilege to host today's webinar for all of you FNP grantees. The reason we're meeting here yet again is that we are about to present you with new funding opportunities designed exclusively for the current FNP grantees under Smart Growth Operational Program stream of funding. Today's webinar will have a couple of parts, so let me just briefly take you through the schedule. So, of course, we will start with what usually we start with, which is an introduction, which will take us a couple of minutes. And then we will have further speeches introduction to the new extra funding opportunities and project extensions that are possible to apply for, followed by an equipment grants competition. This will be followed by a short break, after which we'll have a workshop presented by two of my colleagues, Ania and Katarzyna, who will provide you with a hands-on workshop on how to actually submit an application within an equipment grants competition. When it comes to the webinar itself, how it works, we're of course streaming live, and this is available only to the registered users. This is an by invitation webinar only that is provided to FNP grantees and the members of their teams and administrative and research and administration support staff within the project. Within the webinar webpage, you also have available a chat room, which is a space for you to provide us with the feedback that you have towards our offer, or the questions that you may ask in order to deepen your knowledge about the offer. As well, we will make everything available for you in a couple of days after the webinar is finished. So the record of this webinar will be made publicly available, and you will be also able to download slides that we're presenting right now. However, before we actually go on, I would like to slightly and kind of remind you what's on the stake at the moment with the FNP. So we have already announced the calls for applications within the equipment grants. That has happened at the beginning of October, and we already see some activity of our grantees. What has to be noted here is that this offer is limited only to the grantees within the FIRST team program or within the International Research Agendas program. That has been already implemented within competition documentations of those two programs, and with the supplement to the competition documentation that has been released and published on the October 2nd, we actually provided you with more details on how to submit the proposals to the purchase of specialist equipment. We will be also talking today about the extra funds and the possible project extensions. We are still working on the final version of the document, but we're planning to publish it by the end of the month or at the beginning of November. And that will be followed, of course, by the giving you an access to an online application form. What is also important is a conference, a second interdisciplinary FNP conference that will take place in the second part of November, exactly on the 20th and 21st of November here in Warsaw, to which we cordially invite you to participate, of course. And the conference will boast a couple of interesting talks by FNP grantees. We'll have a poster sessions and an oral presentation by the poster authors. As a matter of fact, we're currently registering poster submissions. So I would like to, well, remind you and invite you again to submit such submissions. And well, what is important that every submission, every poster submission will have, will be given a display possibility during the conference. But what is important from the point of view of today's webinar is that within the conference we will organize a small workshop, yet another workshop where you will be able to meet us very personally and to discuss the details of the new funding opportunities provided to the FNP grantees, especially the ones that we will be covering today. Okay, in case you have any further question later on, you can always email me or anyone at the foundation, really. But I would also, at that occasion, I would like to specify and provide you information on the head of sections. So Beata Frączak is heading the section of program coordination, where program officer Ania Reiter-Smilianic is working, who is responsible, for instance, for equipment grants within the First Team program. While Kinga Słomińska is the head of the International Research Agendas program, where Kasia Wybrańska is working and is coordinating a call for equipment for the IRAP projects. Okay, so I think now we can move further, and we will be starting really giving you details on what are the options for extra funding and the extension of the project length. However, before we go into details of what we have provided, what we are about to provide you, I would also like to remind you of what are the options already available for you. And these are, this has been already published within the competition documentations that were basis of each of the given competition. So there's a couple of things. First of all, you can, from the second reporting period, a financial reporting period, you may actually do some shifts between the categories in your, within your budget, but you have to remember that you have to maintain the percentage thresholds between those, if there are any at the given category. And what is also important, that it is best to do that exercise, to take that chance to do those adjustments of your budget at the time when you are actually preparing and providing us with the financial reports. What can be also changed is the schedule for advance payments. So this can be utilized by some of the grantees if in need. What is also very important is a motion of a possibility for all of us, FNP and our grantees, to actually implement some changes in the project already right now, especially if we see that there are some things or there are some issues within a project that would actually could cause some sort of detrimental effects to the project. And therefore you can always let us know that there's something that you think it's really important and you would have to make a change that is necessary, and without such we might actually have trouble really going on with the project or reaching the goals of the project. What is also very important is that your current computation documentation already provides you opportunities to extend the length of the project duration. What has to be noted here is that we cannot go farther than 30th of June 2023, which is this sort of a cutoff date at the moment. However, there's a couple of possibilities for you to choose from or to actually utilize. So for every PI who is a woman and gives a birth during the time of the project, what is possible is to apply for a 12-month extension to that project because of that a live scenario that has just happened. The same also applies to male and female project leaders who has decided to adopt a child during the project implementation period. So this is a sort of our take on paternity and actually providing parents with some additional chances to develop project. What is also possible is that some of you are actually applying for a grant and plan to actually execute it in a shorter time that a maximum given length of the project. And if in time of the so if you're running your project and you actually realize that initially you decided to provide it with a slightly too short period, you might actually extend it to that maximum time that is allowed by the competition documentation. And if that would not be enough for you, we still have a chance to actually, to actually take your expenses as eligible up to 6 months after the project final date. So this is what is available at the moment for you, and now I would like to go into details of what will be made available. And the offer that I will be talking right now is will be available to all of the grantees, to all of the principal investigators financed under Team Tech, including core facilities schemes, first team homing and reintegration programs. And what is important is that this offer is only valid to those who have already signed the grant agreement contract. So that has to be enforced in order to actually be eligible as a candidate. An overarching aim of that offer is to actually enable principal investigators to implement adequate changes to their project. Well, we know that it takes time for us to actually evaluate your original proposal. So from the moment when you actually submitted your application to the moment when we announced the laureates of the program, to the moment when we actually managed to sign the contract and kicked off with the project, certain things might have happened. People might have published certain bits of work. You might have discovered already some things that could have a profound effect on how you see your project in the future. And that may happen as well during the time you're actually managing and executing the research works. So with this possibility to make the adjustments, we're trying to be as flexible as possible, so to actually respond positively to your needs. At the same time, when you're actually applying within those call of proposals, we would like you to think of that moment, that exercise, as a way to actually rationalize your budget. You might actually see if the original design budget is adequate to what you're doing. Maybe you need some extra funds, and you know already in advance that you will need some extra funds, or maybe you have in a way overshoot it, and maybe you decide to rather sort of spread your funds that has been made available for you and actually prolonged your project. So with this in mind, we will be providing you with the couple of type of sort of mode of actions, a type of internal calls that you might choose to follow. The first one will be actually a small adjustments to the project, and later on, the other option is the proof of concept. So changes to your project that will revolve around an idea of proof of concept. Then we will have two options that are linked with your activity and performance in ERC-like competitions. And with those modes, you will be able to extend the implementation, the length of your project, by up to 12 or even 24 months in length. And last but not least, we will be providing an option for establishing a collaborative research projects across the grantees that are currently funded. So we would like to encourage you to identify colleagues, or maybe you already have some grantees that you're discussing your projects, and to actually start a kick-off in a way independent project that would enable you to nurture that this new added value of collaboration between different grantees across programs at the FNP, and that also includes the group leaders that are working within the IRAP units. Okay, but let's go into slightly more details. So first of all are the limited project adjustments. So these we consider as a really small changes that may happen, that might be important to take place fairly quickly, and for instance they might involve in particular changes to or be linked to your research team that is working with you. For instance, you might, seeing your results, seeing how your project is developing, you might want to, invite additional students that you haven't really thought of initially, and you haven't really thought of the budget for that person. You might want to maybe expand the research task for your postdoc, who originally was designed to take part in your project on a half-time basis, but now as you go through, you see that he or she is really working very well. You receive you're getting a very nice results, and you would like to sort of do some more work of that kind. You can expand his or her time involvement in a project. As these changes are sort of rather adjustments than really proper changes to the project, we will not allow you to extend the implementation time of the project based on those reasons. And also when it comes to covering additional funds, this will also be capped and will be limited to a 10% of your current budget. So this is more really a fine-tuning of your project rather than providing a major reshape of the project, its tasks and its budget. And as it is considered to be a sort of small, we would also try to approve those changes in a sort of a fast-track mode, and that will involve a slightly less complicated assessment procedure. I'll be talking about that a little bit later as well. Secondly, proof of concept. So this is where we would like to, and it is a way for us to actually encourage you to make your ideas, your results, to actually become even more and more closer to the market. So this is introducing to your project a new research task, a new research works that would take on results that you have already received, and that would verify practically the future potential for commercialization of that of your project, of the results that you have received so far. You will be able to check whether the results are really plausible, whether it is possible to somehow commercialize it, or to have broadly speaking a societal impact of the results of that project. And based on that, the project might involve the extension of up to 12 months. It is not necessarily, it depends when you're actually applying, because if you're, for instance, halfway through your project and you already see that you have a results that you think that there's something there and that could potentially be somehow directed towards future commercialization, you may already add those tasks into your project, and we might provide you with additional funds. However, the project itself might not be prolonged. If you're more towards the end of the project, at the other hand, that could be well, a case that you would need well, a bit more time to actually verify the commercialization potential of your results. So apart from the extension of the project, we of course might provide you with extra funding, and it will be decided by the panel at the end of the day, and will really depend on how your budget looks like at the moment. And this option is available to all of the grantees, so through all programs from homing and reintegration to grantees or the principal investigators under TEAM and Team Tech schemes. Then the third option that we have for you are the extensions of the projects, and the first one is linked with your activity, your participation in ERC competitions or competitions that are ERC alike. For instance, those could be what we would consider similar to ERC competition would be an application for a research project with the Human Frontier Science program. The principal investigators funded within the homing, reintegration, first team and team programs would be considered eligible candidates if they have submitted with a success and a sort of a proper proposal to the ERC or a similar calls, and in case of Team Tech project managers, what could be done is the application, or we would recognize your activity within a Horizon 2020 calls that in general are more broadly are sort of more linked towards the societal impact, and that actually illustrates the difference between projects, for instance, Team, which is more a blue sky research, than a Team Tech, when we actually like to see results that would have a really high chance of commercialization or actually making a difference in terms of societal impact. So, of course, obviously, you can, based on that, you can extend the length of your project for 12 months, and you can, of course, as well receive some extra funds to cover it for those 12 months. And I'll be discussing in a couple of slides what are the levels, the suggested levels, the sort of the funding guidelines for those extensions. Then there's a fourth option, which is similar to the one I have just described. However, this is linked not only with activity in competitions in the ERC or similar calls, but in, well, a performance in it. So, in principle, the offer will be available to those who became grantees in the ERC or Horizon 2020 calls, or those who received a status of the Seal of Excellence within certain competitions, or at least were ranked with a score B on the second stage of the peer review assessment, particularly in case of the ERC. And this offer will be only available to first team, team, and Team Tech PIs. What actually I haven't probably mentioned that, well, initially when thinking of the programs of or the grantees of the homing and reintegration, the original competition documentation do not provide any information and do not actually provide a framework for establishing, for extending the projects. However, well, by now, providing that supplement, we will, the PIs, our laureates within homing and reintegration programs will also have a chance to extend the length of their projects for up to 12 months. However, here we're talking about those PIs who were successful in performing and providing the ERC-like grants, and we would like to acknowledge that, thus providing you with a chance of extending your project length for up to 24 months, which is an extra 2 years of funding. And of course, this is most likely connected with an increase in your project budget. And the last but not least is the collaborative research projects. So this option will be available to all currently funded by the FNP project leaders under Smart Growth Operational Program, and that also involves the International Research Agendas group leaders. Our aim here is to really provide a legal and really a funding framework for grantees, for project leaders, to establish new partnership between the projects, between the investigators. And such partnership, well, you have to partner with at least one other FNP grantee in order to become eligible to submit an application within this mode. Well, once you actually apply, and the submission will be done back to back by two, or well, if there's more parties collaborating, by all of them submitting their applications on a parallel basis. So each of you will have to actually indicate the other grantee that you're about to collaborate, and each of you will have to submit a certain attachments that will be individually prepared by each grantee. However, there will also be a number of attachments that will be required, that will have to be prepared by all of the collaborating researchers, and will have to be cross-signed and submitted by each and every one of you. Lastly, of course, with this mode of action, you can both extend the length of your project all the way up to 24 months, and you can also increase adequately your budget. So that is the mode of action that actually provides you with the biggest flexibility. Okay, but so by now we know what are the modes that you can, the sort of a type of the competitions, internal competitions that you can submit your proposals, and now, well, who is the applicant really? And this hasn't really changed since your original application. It's always a principal investigator on any given project together with his or her unit, a host unit. And it could well be a research unit, like a university or Polish Academy of Sciences or any other research institution, or it well could be an enterprise. So we do not discriminate between both. What is also important, that applications might be submitted well, several times. So you can, as a principal investigator, you can actually combine those different modes in a way, let's say, well, sequential mode. However, there are some strings attached. And one of them is the possible length and the scope of the expansion, the extension of your projects. So in case of homing and reintegrations grants, you have to remember that with taking all of those options together, you cannot expand, like we will not be able to extend your project for more than 12 months in total. While with all other grants, in the measure 4.4, which is team tech, first team, the maximum extension to the project is 2 years. So these are the limits that we, at the moment, will not be able to go across. And what are the deadlines then for those applications? So first of all all of the applications will be collected on a continuous mode, and we will of course announce the moment from which you will be able to do so. But you also have to remember that the earliest point for you to submit such an application is to have your grant agreement already signed and in force with the FNP. What is important and you have to remember is that you cannot submit such application later than 3 months after, 3 months to the end date of your project. And there's also something specific for the grantees under the state aid rules. So you will, so for the, as for today, the latest date that you will be able to submit the applications is the June 13th, 2021. And if something changes on the way to that date, we will inform you in a due time if that date will be to be changed. And the funding guidelines. So something that I have mentioned a couple of times already, and these are in a way suggested values of the grants that we think would be sort of fair and that could help you to cover the expenses of your new added research works or research tasks within your projects. So in case of homing and reintegration grants, you will be able to require as much as 400,000 zloty per, a maximum 12 months of an extra extension to your project. In terms of, in case of first team grantees, this cap goes a little bit higher, so you will be able to get as much as 600,000 zloty a year, which in sum makes 1.2 million in case you are eligible for an extension of your project up to 2 years, which is already a considerable amount of funding. Then, as we think about team and team tech laureates, which are, of course, principal investigators with a considerable level of experience and involving a larger research groups, we will be offering a possibility of requesting of up to 800,000 zloty per year of extension in case of a proof of concept and those 12 months extensions linked with your ERC activity. However, if you're an ERC grantee or your performance is quite good, or you're getting into establishing a new research collaboration with other ERC grantee, you might actually receive, you might be covered additionally for a 1 million zloty per a year of a possible extension. So for, let's say, a team grantee, that provides an extra funding of about 2 million per 2 years of extra funding. Well, how will a submission process will look like? Of course, we will be using an electronic system, the foundation electronic system that you all know quite well. You have successfully submitted your application and got the grantee and became a grantee. You're using the system to submit your merit-based and financial reports, so I think you all know quite well how it works. And we will try to streamline it in a very easy way. So most likely the system will actually recognize you as our grantee, and will sort of the application form will be pre-filled with your data that we have in our database. You might of course adjust it, and then there will be some options for you to choose. For instance, like the length, if you would wish to extend the project, so you will have to specify to which extent you would like to make your project last longer. You will be given an access to your budget, so you will be able to as I mentioned earlier, to really make adequate changes to your budget, either requesting more funding or sort of spreading funding across extra months of the project. And there will be a couple of attachments, and for any given mode there will be a maximum of 4 attachments that we will request from you. So irrespectively of the mode of action, you will always be asked about your progress report, indicating what has been going on with your project, and describing the potential for implementation of the results that you have received so far. Also, always we will be asking about the description of your new research tasks that you would like to see in your extra funding, and if applicable, you will be able to specify exactly the reasons for the extension of the length of the project, or the reasons, justification of the changes to your budget. Then for the modes for those calls that are linked with the ERC activity or performance, we will be requesting you to provide us with an adequate information from the authorities that manage those calls. And in case of collaborative research projects, we will ask for 2 attachments that are very important for us. So first one is the description of the partnership. Why have you decided to initiate such partnerships, and what is your mutual aim in that collaborative research? What is the added value? Why do you think you're unable to do it on your own? However, you believe that you will successfully complete those tasks if you will be allowed to collaborate with the other grantee. So that's one of those attachments. The other one is more of a legal type of document. It's not legally bounding yet, but we would like to know about the principles of the collaboration between all of the parties involved, and what is most important is how do you see the division of intellectual property rights, if there are any, to come out of that project that has been done in a collaboration. So this is where we would like to really set things clear at the beginning, and have that information provided to you as early as possible. We have the access to your original applications, to your reports so far. Therefore, we will limit the number of other applications, and we'll try to make it as easy as possible. More information on that we would like to provide you during the workshop in November, during the FNP Interdisciplinary Conference. By that time, we will have a call announced, and the application form will be ready to go and ready to be used by you. So we'll take you through that during that time. Then when it comes to the evaluation of those proposals that we were talking about, we hope that we will be able to do that within maximum of 3 months. So this is what we would like to deliver. Of course, it will consist of the formal evaluation, and you will, in case we find some faulty attachments or something that is not in line, you will be able to correct on that. And there will be a merit-based assessment. So this fast track that I've mentioned at the beginning, and that will relate only to those small limited adjustments to the project, will be based on the consent of the program officer working directly on any given program, together with at least one external opinion by a reviewer. So that is the fastest way. However, If a program officer decides to request more opinions, he or she might do so, or we might also decide to actually put that application, if in doubt, through a panel of experts, which is traditionally kind of a way of evaluating for us. So all of the other applications will go through those panel meetings. The panels might operate also in the different disciplines, depending on the applicants and the field of focus of the project leaders. This panel expert might request a PI to be interviewed, but that might not be necessary. There might be some also additional rounds of reviewing requested by the panel members. So it really depends on the weight of your application, whether it is thoroughly prepared. And what are what will be experts looking after? Mostly is your progress, the progress of your project so far. Both financially and in terms of merit-based progress. We'll be also looking at the integrity of your current new proposal, how it is linked with your ongoing project, and we will be looking at the added value of those new extra bits that you're willing to implement additionally in your project. And at the moment, we do not see an appeals procedure to be available for you with those little changes in the project. So, of course, at the end of the day, we will have a funding agreement. So you have to remember that at the end of the day, you will, in case of your positively assessed and you are given consent to implement those changes, you will form and you will take a new budget to your project, and this new budget will have to obey the rules that are set by us in a competition documentation that you're currently using for your grant. Therefore, for instance, you will have to obey the rules of cost eligibility guide for measure 4.4, which are standard. So we will not provide any extra rules on that. So of course we'll be signing an annex to the grant agreement. And what is also important that before actually signing the annex, we might actually choose to negotiate some further details with you, and mostly panel expert will actually allow or will provide us with a right to negotiate some certain bits of your of the project. So that's it for the moment when it comes to those extra funding and the new options for extension of the durations of the project. So all of your feedback is really welcome. We would like to see what you think of it. And now let's move to equipment grants. And this is these are the calls that has been already announced at the beginning of October. The calls are this offer is available exclusively to First Team and IRAP and MAP project leaders. So, really an aim of providing that option for the grantees is to purchase of the specialist equipment, and that equipment that you would like to add into your project would have to provide us the significant development of your project. You would like to see that it actually is a very vital piece of equipment to make your project even better than it is right now. And alternatively, and in principle, in parallel, it might have it should have the effect on the development of the research staff that is working within your project. But what is this specialist equipment? So we use here a General Statistics Office of Poland sort of definition, and we think of it as a set of testing, measurement, or laboratory devices that represent a low degree of universality, so which are quite fancy, special pieces of equipment, but at the same time with a very high technical parameters, something that provides you to, well, receive certain results with a much higher measurement precision. And I think you somehow, well, in terms of R&D and research, this type of equipment is I think, is broadly understood, and we should have no further issues on what you can actually fund. Things like, you know, types of, I don't know, confocal microscopy or some really highly professional spectrophotometers, and all sort of really high-tech instrumentation that you would not be able to purchase within your current budget, because it has a limit of 5%. There's this cap of 5%, and that can be used only for the low-cost pieces of equipment. With this, we do not put any limits. We think there are some limits that are fair, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later. So what is also very important is that if you apply for funding to purchase any equipment, we have to make sure that you don't have access to that equipment in your current host institution, or that an alternative routes to access such equipment are, well, limited, impossible, or economically unjustified. We will be surveying that during the assessment of your proposal. And this is very important, that if a very similar piece of equipment exists in your, especially at your host institution, you should rather be using that. And when we also say, well, the access to a piece of equipment, it has to be a piece of equipment that has been sort of bought with the idea of well, pursuing a research that has been designed or has been put in place in your FIRST team or IRAP project. In case of International Research Agendas program, there is a clause that you should bear in mind, that, well, the application to purchase of the equipment is linked with a start of the R&D works within the project. So, for instance, by the main applicants, who are at the same time group leaders in the IRAP project. So as soon as they really kick off with research work, they could submit the proposals for this equipment. Or if you identify a new group leaders, and, well, not only identify, but as those new group leaders are recruited by International Science Committee. So after the approval of such a new group leader, we can already discuss a possibility to submit the application, if needed, by a leader of the group to the call for this equipment grants. So again, we have to look on who are the applicants. So in terms of, in case of FIRST team, the applicant is a principal investigator on the grant, together with his or her host unit, but it is limited only to research units. So in case you are a first team grantee supported with under state aid rules, you will not be able to submit a proposal to purchase equipment. And in terms of the IRAP program, it's the IRAP project manager at the IRAP unit, together with the IRAP unit, will be able to submit the proposals. In case of a first team, you will be able to get funding only once. So you can, of course, submit few applications. In case you haven't received or we didn't provide you with a consent on having funded, but all in all, you will be able to get that funding only once. While in case of the IRAP program, IRAP project manager will be able to submit several applications to the call. The deadlines are fairly similar to, the rules are fairly similar to the ones I've mentioned before. So it is a continuous submission, and you have to have your grant agreement signed and enforced with us. And what you have to remember that you cannot submit your application to purchase equipment later than 18 months before the project end date. And this seems logical for us that, well, you cannot really go on and buy a large pieces of equipment at the very end of your project, so it should be at least 18 months before the project is to be completed. And what is also important, and it will be also it will be mentioned once again a little bit later, that the purchase of that equipment must be completed no later than 6 months before the end date of the project. What is the total requested amount that we see to be fair within those equipment grants? So in case of first team, the approximate amount of funding is 750,000 zloty, which equals roughly 175k in euros. And that's the purchase price of the piece of equipment. And in case of IRAP, the level is much higher. It's about 3.5 million zloty, which equals about, slightly above 800k of the purchase price. And of course, in justified cases, if there are fair and substantial reasons behind the request, we might accept funding which is higher. And what is important when it comes to this total requested amount, it consists of the purchase price of equipment with a 17% of a flat rate cost on top of that price. And what is the purchase price in general? So apart from, of course, the amount of money that you pay to your suppliers, it may also include other expenses, things like transportation, installation, and kickoff of your equipment. Some of that pieces might be really complicated, highly technical, so for transport and really setup at the place might be already difficult, so it might be, those costs might be included in the purchase price. You might also negotiate with your supplier and include in that price specialist instructions on how to really operate the instrumentation, checking and testing of that instrumentation, and in general through some sort of technical assistance, especially at the beginning, the first period of the using your equipment. When it comes to submitting your application, this is again, as we mentioned before, it's fairly easy, streamlined electronically, and there's only a few attachments. So first one is the list of equipment that you are willing to purchase. But this will also involve a technical information of what pieces of apparatus you would like to provide, and this has to be really adequate so that the the moment when we provide it to the experts, they will be able to assess what sort of equipment it is. Within that attachment, we would also like to see from you a schedule for purchase, really like providing us with some more details of how do you, when do you plan to start the tendering procedure, when would you like to have it completed, sign the agreement with your supplier, and eventually have it well, deliver it and to your institution, well, followed by the delivery acceptance record on your site. There's also a project progress report, so we'd like to see how your project is going on, has been going on so far, and how this acquisition of the extra equipment would interfere with the project. What are the changes, possible changes to your project, and if so, how would you like to actually illustrate those using your indicators on the project? And last but not least, this is very important and you should take it seriously, is the analysis of the research infrastructure at your host institution and also in the country. And you should really make sure, you should really pay attention to what is available, especially in terms of large pieces of equipment that has been purchased in Poland in past years within innovation economy or operational programs and infrastructure and environment programs as well. So you will have to look into that pieces of equipment, and you will have to address the issue of whether those these pieces of research infrastructure are somehow or were bought to actually be utilized with the research works that you are planning to do with your project. So my colleagues Ania and Kasia will provide you with some more details on really submitting and how to go through well, the submission process just in a few minutes. And I'll take you through slightly through evaluation. So again, we would like to have it finished within 3 months from the moment when you actually submit your equipment application to the moment you receive the results of the evaluation, which will consist again of a formal evaluation, fairly simple and straightforward, and a merit-based peer review assessment of your project. This will be executed by the panel of experts and may involve an extra rounds of reviewing. So the panel might request from the FNP to actually get some more external opinions, critiques on a merit basis for that proposal. This will always include the interview with the PI of the project or a project manager of the IRAP. And with such an interview, 2 other persons might be present, especially ones that are responsible for really managing or overseeing the research infrastructure at the institution where the project is about to be implemented. And in terms of, in case of IRAP, that could also be a group leader that is about to use that piece of infrastructure. What will be assessed is, of course, the project integrity, how the really purchase of that equipment is linked to your current project, how it will develop, how will it interfere, and whether it will provide an added value to the project. And very importantly, it is a legitimacy of your expenses that you foresee for that application. And in this case, we actually do see an appeals procedure for you in case you, if the decision is negative on the funding. So as we're thinking of considerable finances on that grants, we will of course be signing an annex to the grant agreement, and that annex will provide us an information on really advanced payments, settlements, and return policy of for the expenses. And as mentioned before, it has to be completed. The purchase of that equipment has to be completed 6 months to the project date, and that has to be indicated in the project agreement. What is also important, and you should take it into account, that the purchase of the used equipment is possible. However, there are certain terms of conditions that apply to in that case that you will able to find in the supplement to the competition documentation. Obviously, this is typical. We might get involved in the negotiations between the signing the annex, and what the annex will oblige the unit, and this is important, that the unit will have to provide us with a signed agreement with the supplier of this equipment. And that will have to be followed by a delivery acceptance record that will mean really a complete of the purchase of that piece of equipment. I guess yes, this is it. So this is the end of the presentation, really. I think you might have some additional questions, and I see my colleagues are working in a room next to this, answering some of your questions. So feel free to ask any. We're also looking forward to see your feedback to this, those new offers. And yes, and I think now we will take a couple of minutes break, and after which Anya and Kasia will provide you a workshop with on really submitting technicalities of submitting the proposals for equipment grants. So that's it for me. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in November at the FNP Interdisciplinary Conference. Thank you. Goodbye.